but he also updated Garrett Dellinger. We talked about this yesterday. This was a storyline going in to Saturday night's matchup that we were really going to be watching, and it is official. Dellinger, tightrope surgery, out for the next couple of weeks, and most importantly, missing Saturday night's game. Here is Brian Kelly officially giving the update on his veteran interior offensive lineman.
Yeah, he had a tightrope surgery, so he will be out for this weekend's game against Alabama.
How's that?
6 seconds. Yeah, because I think
he knows.
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show, talking about if the line moved at all, like in Las Vegas terms of if this is a big enough deal, do you think that it would affect the point spread? In Vegas, maybe not, but if you're an LSU fan or if you've watched LSU, it's a huge deal. Like maybe Vegas doesn't know, but not having Garrett Dellinger and having Paul Mubanga as your left guard is much different than having Dellinger, who's been here forever and has been your best run blocker for your offensive line, and now that's an offensive line that can't run the football.
Yeah. Yes, you take the football part out of it, and we can break down what it means to the production and the efficiency of the unit, right? Losing Dellinger, least penalized offensive lineman, best run blocker, consistency in the starts has been there through all of it, played multiple positions. Here's what you miss to me the most about Dellinger in a game like Saturday night is just his presence, right? For as important as Will Campbell and as Emory Jones mean to that offensive line, and they are a tremendous anchor of who that unit is. To me, Dellinger is the one that, if you were to say you'll be without in a big game, he's the one that you would probably want to lose the least because of his veteran experience, the position that he plays, and who he is next to is the most important piece that we haven't discussed at all throughout the entire year, because along with Garrett Dellinger, Miles Frazier is a big piece to that as well. Frazier has the experience. He's put his time in. He's played in enormous games. He's been on the road. He's seen just about everything that the league can offer. And to have Lloyd Cushenberry, I wish you had Lloyd Cushenberry, to have DJ Chester sandwiched in between Miles Frazier and Garrett Dellinger has been a huge luxury for really cutting the teeth of Chester in his redshirt freshman season and starting at, in my opinion, what is the second most important position on a football team, the center position. Makes the calls, recognizes the strong sides in the Mike linebacker, is able to communicate in loud and hostile venues. You know how difficult it was to communicate last Saturday night at Kyle Field if you're the opposing team? And what you have to communicate and get across to, 5 guys that are, 6 yards each side of you. I mean, that is stuff that ultimately, I believe, as, kind of us, the fan, watching, take for granted at home through the television of really what's going on the ground level of making sure that the play just doesn't, combust. And Dellinger, Frazier have been enormous for the development and the protection of DJ Chester in that sense. Chester deserves a lot of credit, man. He's taking this on as a redshirt freshman and really, outside of a couple of instances, has really held the rope. Has done a really, nice job. That's an offensive line that had given up a lot of sacks this year. He's a part of it. Don't think that other defensive coordinators and defensive line coaches aren't saying that, look, here's where they could be vulnerable. You got Campbell and Jones on the outside. Those guys have played, millions of years of SEC football. Frazier and Dellinger the same on the inside. Chester's the one that feels like he's the kind of the fish of the group that you would say, if you want to attack, that would be the spot. He's held his own. He deserves a lot of credit. So does Dellinger and Frazier in that as well. And taking Dellinger out of the lineup and replacing him with another redshirt freshman in Paul Mubanga, big spot for Mubanga. Like, I'm not going to focus on what could be the negative. I think we all know that's a redshirt freshman, not a lot of experience, getting his first start as a college football player against Bama under the lights. I mean, hey, man, this is probably what you laid in bed and dreamt about when you were coming up. I want to go play big-time college football somewhere where I can step onto the big stage, play in a big game, national television, and all the eyes of the sport watching. Here you go. I mean, Hollywood couldn't have scripted this thing any better for a player like Mubanga, who's getting a chance to make his first track at college football in front of the world. So, is it ideal? Hell no. Do you wish Dellinger was going? Absolutely. Here's why Brad Davis has been praised for recruiting at a high level for the last 2 years plus. These guys that have redshirted last year and now in their second season, ultimately, it's their time. I mean, a lot of these guys' calendars, their dates, their timeline was set on a track that had them playing more and ready to play next season. It's just sped up for a couple of guys. Because as football hands you every single season, this deck, this hand, dealt to LSU, where you lose Tyree Adams, you lose Dellinger on the road, it sets you back now a couple of spots in a very deep room, that has inexperience. So, do we have the Mubanga bite?
We do.
All right, here's Kelly yesterday talking about the redshirt freshman.
Yeah, I mean, Paul has steadily worked himself up into, what would have been what I would call a key backup, right? Somebody that, is poised to go in a pivotal time, and you expect him to get the job done. Now he's a starter for us, most likely for at least this week, right? And so his development has been one where I think he's made his most progress through execution. He's a quick study. You don't have to tell him twice. He understands our scheme in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. This has been really just about the physical development of Paul, more so than it has been about his mental abilities relative to picking up what we want to do and how we want to do it.
Now, I will say this. This is not the most intimidating Alabama defensive line that has come into Tiger Stadium. I mean, they have brought some units in here over the years. I mean, guys that have single-handedly changed the game, right? Who was it that year, Burrow's sophomore year, the guy that's now with the Jets, Quinnen Williams, was just...
Ruin your day.
I think he left here as a Heisman candidate. People were talking about giving him Heisman votes when he pulled out of Baton Rouge. I mean, it was like a Glenn Dorsey sophomore year Auburn experience where he was picking people up and pushing them into the backfield 3, 4, 5 yards. I mean, into Burrow and Clyde.
Yeah, you saw it early to where if you were watching from an LSU perspective, you're going,
this is going to be a long night.
It's going to be a long night.
It's going to be a long night because you don't have anything in the arena.
If you can't, nobody can stop it.
Unless Alan Faneca is here somewhere and we can go dress him out.
Mike the Tiger on
It'll
the
be
field.
a long night. A long night. This is not, which, by the way, those defensive lines were coached by Bo Davis.
Cavalry's coming.
This is not that unit,
Alabama,
right? So I would actually say that Mubanga's test last Saturday night at Kyle Field in College Station versus that front was probably a little stiffer than what he's going to have to go up against this Saturday night. And look, I mean, at that point, it's a half a dozen here, it's 6 over there, right? I mean, it's not a lot of difference, but there is. I mean, when you're not rotating guys like A&M is into the third and fourth quarter, Dellinger went down early in that game, right? I mean, Mubanga saw it for about 2.5, 3 quarters. So he'll step into it, with that under his belt. A couple of weeks for Davis, Frank Wilson, Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton to really coach him up on how to hold the rope for 4 quarters. This, this Bama team is not what it has been over the years. So,
but neither is this LSU rushing game for now.
And
you've seen spurts.
This is a redshirt freshman making his first start. I mean? So, that's a wash. It's a scratch. That's...
I do think, like you said, the environment at A&M was probably not the best environment to step into, especially next to another redshirt freshman at center, where I've heard T-Bob talk about this quite a bit because he played the position. And he said you get to these spots whenever you're at Kyle Field or an away stadium where I'm just trying to snap the ball. I can't hear anything. I just know I have to snap it at some point. And that's where I think playing in the comforts of the friendly confines of Tiger Stadium help you immensely, because now you don't have to do, you're not working on a silent counter. You're not trying to just make sure I can get this ball back to Nuss. Now you can communicate a little bit more. And Nussmeier has taken on a heaping amount of responsibility in doing so. And I think that being able to do it at home helps you a ton.
Yes, I agree. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that going towards LSU and helping them out in this situation. And the first thing is having this thing at home and being able to do this in your backyard with your fans. And look, there's a lot of options in that room. I mean, really and truly. And there, you can tell they're kind of running this thing like best next man up. It's not best guard next up or best tackle next up. If one of the tackles goes down, and this was before Tyree Adams was hurt, Tyree Adams was a backup, but we also saw Miles Frazier go out earlier this year against South Carolina, and Adams went into the game at guard. So they're looking at it as just kind of a depth room, right? Where it's, hey, he's the 6th best guy, that's the 7th best guy, that's the 8th best guy, and you just kind of go down the line of plugging those guys in and playing. I mean, we've even seen Bo Bordelon change his number now and take snaps at tight end to just get another blocking presence on the field. So, I mean, they've got options in that room. They've got, choices, guys that they've recruited at a very high level. And, for Mubanga to be the guy that is chosen here, I think says a lot. And in all honesty, if you go back and watch, look, they started throwing the ball late in that game, right? I mean, there was no secret, and they were playing from behind what they were going to be doing. I thought Mubanga kind of held his water pretty well. And, I mean, LSU they're not just going to show up on Saturday night, in my opinion, and turn into a productive running team. They kind of are who they are at this point, is my way of thinking, and especially if you take out what is considered to be the top offensive line player from a run blocking standpoint and a guy with a ton of experience, I don't think that they're going to upgrade there, right? I mean, if you can just kind of get a little close to what you've had with Mubanga, that's a win. And they're going to throw the ball. I mean, they kind of are who they are. And Mubanga, I think, showed that he's got the athleticism. He's got the footwork. He can handle it. So let's see, man. Big spot for Mubanga.
Alabama, the 64th ranked rush defense in the country. So Arkansas is better.
Sure.
Technically. And what LSU did against Arkansas, I think was a better game plan for what you saw. Because LSU, if they can get defensively, they can turn you over a little bit, and then I don't see a world where you're asking us to play perfectly if you ask him to throw it 50 times again.
Yes.
And it's happened, but it's just something that is so much responsibility and almost unfair to him to be able to shoulder this entire game like he's playing for Mike Leach at Washington State. We're throwing it 60 times. And when you put the ball in the air that many times, something's going to happen.
Right. Good or bad.
Good, and it's not him. He's a good player. It's just if you can't run it, you ran for 30 yards against Texas A&M. What do you think you're going to do?
All right, let's see. This is 11. Kelly yesterday talking about Nussmeier and his decision-making.
Yeah, I mean, I stand behind my comments. Now they have to come to fruition, right? I mean, we've got to go do it. And part of it was, look, I mean, Garrett can't be the guy that feels like he's got to go do everything. And part of it has to come from Garrett to understand that, I don't have to make a play every time I'm out there. 0 is okay, right? So a little bit comes from Garrett, and a little bit comes from play calling, and a little bit comes from, the ability to commit to making sure that we have some more balance in terms of the running game. And that means we got to block better, and I don't mean just the 5 guys. I mean, the receivers and the tight end and the backs got to do a better job of seeing things and getting to the second level and making people miss. So it's an all-in thing, right? When we say that, it's not just saying one guy's got to do a better job at, giving Garrett, more assistance. Everybody's got to be involved in that.
Oh, yeah, Coach, right here. Obviously, it's going to be a big game for guys like Alexander and Ashton Stamps going head-to-head with Ryan Williams and Bernard. Just what have you seen from that tandem over the last several weeks in terms of their development as you've settled into those two guys, and how has maybe Corey Raymond had an impact on their development this year?
We actually have that answer right here. This is the last one, Kelly talking about the DBs and their challenge this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd like to stand here each and every week and credit, Corey or Bo Davis or, Brad Davis or Joe Sloan. I mean, that comes with the territory, right? At the end of the day, players have to play consistently based upon trusting the technique and trusting their ability. I think what we see here with the corners in particular is a trust in the teaching and then a trust in themselves. They're trusting themselves a lot more. They're playing with a lot more confidence. And I think that's the next step in the maturation of a player like Stamps, for example. I think Alexander's had a little bit more of that because he's a little bit more of an older player in a sense, right? But that's really it, right? Players playing with more confidence, I think, at that position, trusting their teaching, and certainly trusting themselves that they can go out there and they can play with a great deal of confidence and swagger.
You can feel that with the defensive backs in LSU. I mean, you can feel them gaining confidence and playing at a much higher speed, right? They're playing faster. And I think that's going to continue to evolve under Raymond as they continue to recruit at a higher level, bring guys in. I think that being able to construct a room that looks very similar to DBU is 2 years away from it being here, right? You'll start to see signs of it next season, and I think that you've seen signs of it this year, to be honest. I think that they've had some guys that have played a little bit better than expected. You can see it in Ashton Stamps. I think Stamps is a guy that has had a solid season from really gaining his confidence and going through it. Just being able to compete through week in, week out of the SEC.
Because Alexander cannot be understated. How
No
important
way.
he's been to that room.
Alexander has been phenomenal. Just
get you paid phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously, you got some young guys in the safety spot that you just got to take your lumps with, of what happens back there, and I'm okay with that. That's not a surprise. That you're going to have to play Ahmad Bro, Deshaun Spears, some of these freshmen that have P.J. Woodland. I mean, you've had some really bright spots that have stepped up within that rookie class, and some of them on defense, and you've had to take some good with the bad, and that's to be expected. Here was Kelly yesterday talking about the differences of defending Jalen Milroe coming up this week than in years past, especially last season when Tommy Rees and that play caller really had him playing at a high level against LSU.
Well, last year, Matt, it was evolving. Like, I don't know that they knew what they wanted to do because it was a quarterback controversy. But they were kind of playing multiple quarterbacks last year at Alabama. I think they had 2 or 3 quarterbacks going back and forth. Then they kind of settled on Milroe just before they got to us, and it was, I think, big chunk play. It was run the quarterback. Here they've had all spring and they've settled on a system with a starting quarterback. So it's consistency week in and week out. They're doing the same thing with him week in and week out. So there's a comfort level within the offense. When we got to him last year, you weren't really sure what you were going to get. It was a little bit of everything. And now there's a consistency within their offensive structure, and there's a comfort level in terms of what he's doing.
Best running back in the country that can throw it, Jalen Milroe. I think, LSU, what they could not stop 2 weeks ago or a week ago versus Marcel Reed and Texas A&M will be on, it'll be times 10 coming in here on Saturday night. Milroe is electric from the stance of he can change the game with his mobility, and he's developed as a passer. I don't think that we've seen that as much as people thought this year as we thought coming into the to the season from the off season. So it will be a challenge. I will bet my life that Blake Baker is going to have this defense prepared to stop a running quarterback. I mean, what happened to them the last time out will probably be a low point for Baker when you kind of step away and talk about his spectrum of being here, because there have been many a highs, pulling production out of players that were struggling last season, finding the identity of this defense, improving the tackling, getting the players on the field that needed to be out there. Braden Swinson, Whit Weeks alone, the stories there are praise coach worthy. And to some of the low points, I would think that last Saturday night, when we step away from it, will be the lowest of points for Baker in his first season, and that he'll never allow that to happen again. Right? I mean, I just don't think. And from a standpoint of having the opportunity to really put that in the past and close that argument, you couldn't ask for anything more if you were Baker. Like, to go from Marcel Reed to chopping you up like he did last Saturday night to what is the best running quarterback in college football coming in next in Jalen Milroe, you've got an opportunity to put a lot of demons to sleep. And I think Baker sees this as an opportunity of, hey, we're fixing that problem. And we're going to fix it against what people believe to be the biggest threat of a running quarterback in the country. So I look forward to see how they defend Milroe. I think that they'll be ready for the run capability of the quarterback. I really do.
For as bad as the A&M performance was, which it was excellent in the first half, 2.5 quarters until Reese got in the game, and then, but in that same vein, it becomes something that you probably, now looking at Alabama, it's like something that was warranted. Like, you'd rather that happen against A&M than be surprised by Milroe. Like, I don't think practice is very fun for the defensive side of the football of trying to stop the quarterback run game. Like, we're not letting that happen again.
This is Kelly 7 talking about what they cleaned up in the bye week.
Well, I think each situation is different. Look, they clearly knew what happened in the Texas A&M game. I mean, just to recap, we turned the ball over 3 times and we couldn't stop our quarterback. We didn't have the emotional flexibility to kind of flip the switch. And did we spend enough time in helping our guys do that, right? So this is coaches coaching and players playing. Did we do our best? And obviously we did not, right? So collectively, we all had to take ownership in that last week. So it wasn't a fun week to be around, but we've put that past us, and our focus and attention has been on working on getting better in those areas that we know that we have to get better in as coaches and players, and getting prepared for a really good Alabama team.
Translation, they'll never get caught getting beat by a running quarterback like they did last week.
As I'm saying, for as bad as it was, it might end up being a positive for you in this
Right.
Because when you look at, this is the key to the football game in my mind of what Milroe running the football is. Because when you look at the games that they've had to win, or feel like that were quote-unquote big games for Alabama, Georgia ran it 16 times. SC, when they were down, 18 times. Tennessee in a loss, 14 times. Like, whenever it gets, like, push comes to shove, they want Milroe to run the football.
Absolutely.
So if you can quell that a little bit, because like the Georgia, that's definitely their biggest win, 16 for 117. South Carolina, 18 times but only 36 yards. If you can keep that at a minimum, you have a very good chance to kind of shorten this football game, and if you can get out ahead to a lead, that kind of goes away. Mm-hmm. You'll be playing from behind, and LSU can extend themselves. Because I think people are focusing a lot on the negative of what that Texas A&M game was, whenever it was phenomenal for 2.5 quarters. Like, the defense isn't all of a sudden bad. They almost went into A&M and won, but you got caught with your pants down a little bit. It can't happen, but it did. But now that won't happen again.
I agree. Is this a de facto playoff game? A lot of chatter around the country that this is an elimination game between LSU and Alabama on Saturday night. What's the head coach from LSU think about that?
Each game that we play is a new game in itself, and I think it goes to what I talked about. We're much more focused on playing 4 quarters of football. Our focus last week was, cleaning up the things that we needed to take care of internally, and so our focus, where our real work was thinking about what we needed to do better to play at a higher level. Look, all that other stuff is out there, but it doesn't help us relative to what we need to do. And I know there's been other national talks about, this is an elimination game. Well, if this is an elimination game, every game in the SEC is an elimination game. Everybody that has a loss, everybody that has 2 losses, everybody that plays each other, it's an elimination game. So we can kind of put that to rest. This is really about each team in the SEC knows where they're at, right? I mean, the record speaks for itself. This is about you need to play your very best when your best is needed.
Look, I think that's a great answer. I think that's recognizing that this is a de facto elimination game, but every week is its life in its own self. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago after, going into the Ole Miss game. After you had the one conference loss, or after you were playing undefeated and you were trying to avoid that one conference loss, they were all going to ultimately be a playoff atmosphere, playoff game going down the stretch. And like we talked about yesterday, if LSU just wins out, if they go undefeated in November, they're going to Atlanta. There's a lot of quirky things that have to happen for the SEC championship game. It's weird, man. There's a lot of things that have to go on, and it's crazy that the SEC really kind of allowed themselves to be open like this, but they are. But all LSU really has to do, not really, all LSU has to do is win out and they're in. Same with A&M. A&M's, who they have? They have Auburn and Texas. Texas is the last game, obviously. But I think they have one maybe non-conference in Auburn.
New Mexico State,
Auburn, and Texas. Go undefeated in November. It's LSU and Texas A&M in Atlanta, which is wild. But I think week in, week out, it's like that for Alabama too. It's the same storyline for Alabama.
But that's why this is de facto playoff game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's.
And if you're LSU, like everything is for as I guess tumultuous as this season started because USC just benched Miller Moss. Like he was a Heisman candidate after week 1.
Wow.
And now he is riding the pine.
Wow.
But even with that loss and what happened at A&M, you still have set yourself up for this game to be as big as it ever could be. And that's all you can really ask for if you're LSU is like one more tilt. LSU, Alabama at home, like I'll take that. So while it's gone up and down, I think LSU's probably played a little bit better than people thought this year. They're one of the surprises maybe in the SEC.
I would be in that camp.
Yeah. And so if you wanted to sign up for one game against Alabama, you got to keep it rolling after that. But for this to be as important as it feels like it is, that's a win in itself.
One more from BK. This is 10 of him talking about the news that Jacobe and Guillory broke on the show last week that he was going to be returning for one more season in Baton Rouge.
Well, he's a stalwart. He's a physically gifted player, strong, mature. He brings a presence, certainly for us in terms of the leadership part. And he's a really good football player. So you're just adding some stability to the defensive line, with some really good young players that are getting seasoned this year. So whereas much as it was a concern or a question mark coming into the season, I think as we evolve through the season, with having him back and the guys that have gotten a lot of work at that position and in recruiting, I think we're going to find that back to being what it should be here at LSU, and that's a strength at that position.
Big news with Tank coming back. We appreciate him for stopping by and sharing that on our show last week as Jacobe and Guillory made it official that he'll be coming back to LSU for one more season. So the biggest news out of the press conference yesterday is that Garrett Dellinger is going to be out. He's going to be out this Saturday night and maybe even a couple of weeks after dealing with tightrope surgery, sustaining an injury at Kyle Field at Texas A&M a couple of weeks back. So that hurts LSU. Can Paul Mubanga really take this opportunity that he is getting and run with it? This is kind of, as we said at the beginning of the show, Hollywood couldn't script this thing a lot better for Mubanga than what it's setting up to be on a Saturday night here, stepping in